behind the golden gates of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets have been buried beneath layers of protocol and tradition, a single whispered conversation would shatter the very foundation of the modern monarchy. What started as a routine security briefing on a fog-covered Tuesday morning would spiral into the most explosive revelation the royal family had faced since the abdication crisis of 1936. Palace guard Thomas Mitchell had served the crown faithfully for 12 years, his silence bought and paid for by duty and an ironclad oath of discretion. But some secrets are too dangerous to keep buried, especially when they threaten to destroy the one person he'd grown to respect above all others. When Mitchell discovered what had been happening in the shadows of Clarence House, he faced an impossible choice: remain silent and watch injustice unfold, or risk everything to expose a betrayal that reached the highest echelons of the royal household. The morning Prince William received that urgent, encrypted message would mark the beginning of the end for carefully constructed lies that had been festering for months. In a world where image is everything and scandal can topple kingdoms, someone had been playing a dangerous game with the future of the crown itself. And now, with evidence that could change everything, the future king would be forced to choose between family loyalty and the truth that threatened to tear the monarchy apart. What Mitchell had witnessed in those shadowy corridors would force William into the most difficult decision of his life, one that would echo through the halls of Buckingham Palace and reverberate across the Commonwealth. The Game of Thrones was about to become devastatingly real, and not everyone would survive the fallout. The clock was ticking, cameras were watching, and somewhere in the depths of the palace, a secret that had been carefully guarded was about to explode into the light of day. The ancient stones of Windsor Castle held their secrets well, but Thomas Mitchell had learned to read the subtle signs that others missed. 12 years of faithful service as a palace guard had taught him that the most important conversations happened in the spaces between official duties, in the quiet moments when the royal family believed themselves unobserved. It was during one such moment, on a particularly dreary October evening, that Mitchell first noticed something was wrong. He had been conducting his routine patrol of the East Wing when he heard raised voices coming from the Queen Consort's private study. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar, and though every fiber of his training told him to walk past, something in the tone made him pause. Camilla's voice carried through the gap, sharp with an edge Mitchell had never heard before. She was speaking to someone on the telephone, her words careful but unmistakably threatening. "The arrangement was clear," she said, her fingers drumming against the mahogany desk. "William cannot know about the financial transfers. If he discovers what we've been moving through the duchy accounts, everything falls apart." Mitchell felt his blood run cold. The Duchy of Cornwall's financial affairs were strictly regulated, with every transaction scrutinized by Parliament and the public. Any irregularities could spark a constitutional crisis that would make previous royal scandals look like minor embarrassments. "I don't care what excuses you have to make," Camilla continued, her voice growing more agitated. "The charitable foundation records need to be altered before the annual audit. We've come too far to let some accountant's curiosity destroy our plans." The guard's hands trembled slightly as he realized the magnitude of what he was hearing. The Queen Consort wasn't just discussing minor administrative matters. She was orchestrating what sounded like systematic financial fraud, using royal charitable foundations as a cover for personal enrichment. Over the following weeks, Mitchell found himself paying closer attention to the patterns around Clarence House. He noticed unusual meetings with men in expensive suits who weren't on any official visitor logs. He observed late-night document shredding sessions in offices that should have been empty. Most disturbing of all, he witnessed several heated phone calls between Camilla and various financial advisors, all centered around the same theme: keeping Prince William in the dark about certain transactions. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening when Mitchell was assigned to security detail for a private dinner party. As guests mingled in the main salon, he positioned himself near the service corridor that provided access to Camilla's private office. His patience was rewarded when he overheard a conversation between Camilla and her private secretary, Margaret Thornfield, that left no doubt about the scope of their activities. "The Monaco account is getting too much attention," Thornfield whispered urgently. "The bank is asking questions about the source of the deposits. We need to move the remaining $2 million before anyone connects it to the children's cancer charity donations." Camilla's response was cold and calculating. "Transfer it to the Swiss holding company. And make sure the paperwork shows it as consulting fees for royal protocol advice. If anyone asks, we were providing expertise to international charity organizations." Mitchell's heart pounded as he processed what he'd heard. They were stealing money from children's cancer charities. Money donated by grieving families and well-meaning supporters who believed their contributions were helping sick children. The betrayal was so profound, so fundamentally wrong, that it took all of his training to remain composed. But the worst revelation was yet to come. As the evening progressed, Mitchell overheard Camilla discussing contingency plans that involved framing Prince William for the financial irregularities if they were ever discovered. She spoke casually about planting evidence in his personal accounts, about creating a paper trail that would make him appear responsible for the missing funds. William's always been too trusting, she told Thornfield with a laugh that chilled Mitchell to the bone. If we need a scapegoat, he's perfectly positioned. The press already questions his financial management skills. It wouldn't be hard to convince them he's been skimming from the charities to fund his lifestyle. That night, Mitchell lay awake in his small apartment near the castle grounds, wrestling with the enormous burden of knowledge he now carried. He thought about his oath of loyalty to the crown, about the 12 years of faithful service that had earned him the trust of the royal family. But he also thought about the sick children whose donations were being stolen, about Prince William being set up to take the fall for crimes he knew nothing about. The next morning brought an unexpected development that would force Mitchell's hand. Prince William announced a surprise audit of all charitable foundations connected to the royal family, prompted by questions from investigative journalists about financial transparency. The audit was scheduled to begin within 2 weeks, and Mitchell knew that Camilla would have to act quickly to cover her tracks. His suspicions were confirmed that afternoon when he observed several men in business suits arriving at Clarence's house with boxes of documents and computer equipment. They worked through the night, and by morning, Mitchell noticed that several filing cabinets that had been full the day before were now conspicuously empty. The realization hit him like a physical blow. They weren't just covering their tracks, they were preparing to pin everything on William. The audit would find exactly what they wanted it to find, and the future king would be destroyed by crimes he hadn't committed. As Mitchell watched William interact with charity volunteers that afternoon, laughing with children from the cancer ward and genuinely caring about their stories, he knew he couldn't stand by and let an innocent man be destroyed. The prince's genuine compassion for the sick children, the very children whose donations were being stolen, made the betrayal even more heartbreaking. That evening, Mitchell made the most difficult decision of his life. Sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold beside him, he began typing an encrypted message to Prince William's private secretary. The message contained everything he had observed, every conversation he had overheard, and every piece of evidence he could provide without compromising his position. But even as he prepared to send the message, Mitchell knew that his life was about to change forever. Exposing the queen consort would make him the most hated man in certain circles, and there would be powerful people who would stop at nothing to silence him. The weight of the royal family's secrets had crushed stronger men than him, but some truths were too important to bury. As midnight approached and the castle settled into its ancient rhythms, Thomas Mitchell pressed send on a message that would shake the monarchy to its very foundations. He had served the crown faithfully for 12 years, but now he was about to discover that sometimes serving the crown meant protecting it from its own members. In the darkness of his small apartment, with the lights of Windsor Castle glowing in the distance, Mitchell wondered if he had just committed the most courageous act of his life, or signed his own death warrant. Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. There would be no going back from what he had just set in motion. Prince William's private secretary, David Hartwell, received the encrypted message at precisely 6:47 a.m. While reviewing the prince's schedule for the day, what he read in those carefully documented pages made him immediately cancel William's morning appointments and request an urgent private meeting. William was in his study at Kensington Palace, reviewing notes for a speech about mental health initiatives, when Hartwell knocked on the door with unusual urgency. The secretary's pale complexion and trembling hands immediately told the prince that something was seriously wrong. "Your Royal Highness," Hartwell began, his voice barely steady, "I've received some information that requires your immediate attention. It concerns the Queen Consort and financial irregularities in the charitable foundations." William set down his notes and gave Hartwell his full attention. In the 12 years they had worked together, he had never seen his secretary so visibly shaken. "What kind of irregularities, David?" Hartwell handed him a tablet containing Mitchell's detailed account, watching as William's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to barely contained rage. The prince read in complete silence for nearly 20 minutes, his jaw tightening with each revelation. "These are serious accusations," William said finally, his voice controlled but dangerous. "Are we certain about the source?" "Thomas Mitchell has been with Palace Security for 12 years, Hartwell replied. "His record is impeccable, and he's provided specific dates, times, and conversation details. He's also indicated that he has recorded evidence, though he's understandably reluctant to reveal its location until he's certain of protection." William stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where he and Harry had played as children. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now facing a crisis that could destroy the institution he had been raised to serve and protect. "The timing is suspicious," he murmured. "The audit announcement seems to have accelerated their timeline." He turned back to Hartwell. "What's your assessment of Mitchell's motivations? He's requesting no compensation and specifically asked that his identity be protected. He seems genuinely concerned about the children's charities and about protecting you from being framed. His message included a warning that documents are being prepared to implicate you if the scheme is discovered." The weight of the revelation settled over William like a lead blanket. Not only was someone close to his family stealing from sick children, but they were also preparing to destroy his reputation and possibly end his future as king. The betrayal cut deeper because it came from someone who had been welcomed into the family, someone who had promised to support the monarchy. "I need to see the evidence myself," William decided.
"Arrange a secure meeting with Mitchell. And David, we need to approach this carefully.
If Camilla suspects we know, she might accelerate her plans or destroy evidence we need."
That afternoon, Mitchell received word through encrypted channels that his meeting with Prince William had been arranged for that evening in a disused cottage on the Windsor estate.
The location was chosen for its privacy and historical significance. It was where previous kings had met with trusted advisors during times of crisis. As evening shadows stretched across the countryside, Mitchell made his way to the cottage, carrying a leather satchel containing months of carefully gathered evidence. His hands shook as he knocked on the heavy wooden door, knowing that the next hour would determine not just his own fate but potentially the future of the British monarchy. William answered the door personally, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, but his bearing remained unmistakably regal. "Mr. Mitchell," he said simply, "thank you for coming. Please sit down." The cottage's interior was sparse but comfortable, with a fire crackling in the stone fireplace. William had chosen this setting deliberately. It felt more like a conversation between two concerned men than a formal royal audience. "Before we begin," William said, "I want you to understand that I take these allegations very seriously. I also want you to know that if what you're telling me is true, you have my personal protection and my gratitude. But I need to see everything you have." Mitchell opened his satchel and began laying out documents, photographs, and recording devices on the wooden table between them. "Your Royal Highness, what I'm about to show you will be difficult to hear. I've been documenting this for 3 months, and the scope is worse than my initial message indicated." For the next 2 hours, Mitchell walked William through a comprehensive presentation of evidence that painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning nearly 18 months. Bank statements showed millions of pounds being diverted from children's cancer charities into offshore accounts. Recorded conversations revealed detailed plans to manipulate audit results and frame William for the missing funds. The most damaging evidence was a series of emails between Camilla and several co-conspirators, including prominent members of London's financial elite. These emails detailed not just the theft itself, but discussions about expanding the scheme to include other royal charities and even consider targeting funds meant for veteran support.
"They've been using your name and reputation to solicit additional donations," Mitchell explained, showing William forged correspondence.
Donors think they're contributing to causes you personally endorse, but the money is being diverted before it reaches the intended recipients.
William's composure finally cracked when Mitchell played a recording of Camilla laughing about the stupid public who donated money thinking it would actually help sick children. The prince's hands clenched into fists as he heard her dismiss the donors as sentimental fools who deserve to lose their money. "She's been planning this for months," Mitchell continued. "The scheme was designed to self-destruct with you taking the blame. There are documents being prepared that will make it appear you authorized all the financial transfers. When the audit reveals the missing money, the evidence will point directly to you." The revelation that struck William hardest was learning that Camilla had been manipulating his father's trust and affection to gather information about royal financial procedures. She had been using King Charles's love and confidence as weapons against his own son. "The most disturbing part," Mitchell said quietly, "is that she's discussed expanding this to include Princess Catherine's charitable work. They view her popularity as an opportunity to raise even more money that can be diverted." At the mention of his wife, William's restraint finally shattered. "That's enough," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "I've heard enough to know that action must be taken immediately." As the meeting concluded, William looked at the guard who had risked everything to protect both the monarchy and innocent children. "Mr. Mitchell, you've performed the greatest service to the crown that any subject could perform. You've also put yourself in considerable danger. From this moment forward, you're under my personal protection." Walking back to his car under the cover of darkness, William felt the full weight of what lay ahead. He wasn't just facing a family scandal, he was confronting treason of the highest order. The woman his father had married, the woman who bore the title Queen Consort, had been systematically stealing from sick children while planning to destroy the heir to the throne. The drive back to Kensington Palace gave William time to consider his options, none of which were simple or painless. He could confront Camilla directly, but that would likely result in evidence being destroyed and accusations being made that would create a he-said-she-said situation. He could go to his father, but King Charles's devotion to his wife might cloud his judgment or lead to the information being leaked back to Camilla. The most difficult option was also the most necessary. William would have to build an airtight case before making any moves, gathering enough evidence to ensure that when the truth came out, there could be no doubt about Camilla's guilt or his own innocence. As he pulled through the gates of Kensington Palace, William made a decision that would define his future reign. He would not just expose the conspiracy, he would use it as an opportunity to reform the monarchy's financial oversight systems and restore public trust in the institution. The crisis would become a catalyst for the kind of modernization and transparency that the royal family had long resisted. But first, he had to survive the most dangerous game of chess ever played within the walls of the British royal palaces, where the stakes were nothing less than the future of the crown itself. The morning after his meeting with Mitchell, Prince William initiated what would become the most delicate investigation in modern royal history. He couldn't trust the traditional palace security channels, as he had no way of knowing how deep the corruption ran or who might be feeding information back to Camilla. Instead, he reached out to Sir Marcus Rothwell, a former MI5 director who had served the crown with distinction and absolute discretion. Rothwell arrived at Kensington Palace through a service entrance, his presence disguised as a routine security consultation. The 70-year-old spymaster had weathered enough constitutional crises to understand immediately that William was facing something far more dangerous than a typical royal scandal. "Your Royal Highness," Rothwell said as he reviewed Mitchell's evidence in William's private study, "what you're dealing with here isn't just fraud, it's an attack on the monarchy itself. The systematic nature of this scheme suggests professional criminal planning, possibly with international connections." William had spent the night analyzing the evidence and had reached similar conclusions. The offshore accounts Mitchell identified are registered in multiple jurisdictions. This level of sophistication suggests they have expert financial and legal advice. "I'm concerned we're looking at the tip of an iceberg." Rothwell nodded grimly. "The fact that they're preparing to frame you indicates they always intended this to be discovered. The question is whether the goal is personal enrichment or something more sinister, perhaps destabilizing the succession itself." This possibility had occurred to William, and it added urgency to their investigation. If Camilla's ultimate goal was to damage his reputation so severely that he would be forced to abdicate, then someone was playing a very long game with the future of the British monarchy. "I need to know who else is involved," William said. "Mitchell identified several co-conspirators, but I suspect the network is larger. We also need to secure evidence before they have a chance to destroy it." Over the next week, Rothwell assembled a small team of trusted investigators who began the delicate work of mapping the conspiracy without alerting its participants. Using contacts in international banking and intelligence services, they started tracking the money flows and identifying the full network of participants. Meanwhile, William had to maintain the pretense of normalcy, attending official functions and family gatherings while knowing that Camilla was actively plotting against him. The strain was evident to those who knew him well, but he attributed his tension to stress over upcoming royal duties. The breakthrough came when Rothwell's team intercepted communications between Camilla and a Swiss lawyer named Klaus Weber, who specialized in creating untraceable financial structures for wealthy clients with questionable motives. The intercepted emails revealed that the scheme was far larger than anyone had imagined. "They've been targeting multiple royal charities across the Commonwealth," Rothwell reported during a secure meeting in an underground conference room beneath Buckingham Palace. "We're looking at systematic theft spanning 3 years, with estimated losses exceeding £50 million. The numbers were staggering, but what shocked William even more was learning that Camilla had been recruiting other members of the extended royal family to unknowingly participate in her schemes. Several minor royals have been manipulated into endorsing fundraising events that were actually fronts for money laundering operations. She's been using the family's trust against them," William realized. "Everyone believes they're supporting legitimate charitable work, while she diverts the funds for personal use." The investigation also revealed that Camilla had been building detailed dossiers on various family members, collecting information that could be used for blackmail or manipulation. William's file was particularly extensive, containing everything from his financial records to private correspondence with Catherine. But the most chilling discovery came when Rothwell's team uncovered evidence that Camilla had been in contact with certain tabloid journalists, feeding them stories designed to gradually erode William's public image.
The plan was sophisticated and long-term. Create a pattern of negative coverage that would make the fraud accusations seem credible when they eventually surfaced.
She's been setting you up for years, Rothwell explained, showing William a timeline of planted stories.
Every negative article about your finances, every question about your charitable work, it's all been orchestrated to create a foundation for the larger frame-up. The revelation that his stepmother had been systematically undermining him while pretending to support the family was devastating.
William realized that countless private conversations had been reported back to Camilla. The family strategies had been shared with someone actively working to destroy the monarchy from within. As the investigation deepened, they discovered that Camilla's motivations weren't entirely financial.
Intercepted communications revealed a deep-seated resentment toward William and Catherine, stemming from their popularity with the public.
She viewed their success as a threat to her own status and had convinced herself that damaging William was necessary to protect her position. She genuinely believes she's saving the monarchy by removing you from succession, Rothwell observed. In her mind, she's the victim of a system that favors you over her contributions to the family. This psychological insight helped William understand the scope of the threat. Camilla wasn't just a criminal. She was someone who had convinced herself that her crimes were acts of patriotism. This made her both more dangerous and more unpredictable than a typical fraudster. The team also uncovered evidence that Camilla had been exploring ways to manipulate King Charles's health information, potentially to create situations where her influence over royal decisions would be increased.
Medical records and private health consultations had been accessed without authorization, suggesting a willingness to exploit even the king's vulnerabilities. As October turned to November, William realized that he was running out of time.
The original charity audit was approaching, and Camilla's team was accelerating their efforts to plant incriminating evidence. Rothwell's surveillance indicated that final preparations were being made to spring the trap that would destroy William's reputation.
"We need to move soon," Rothwell advised. "They're planning to trigger the discovery within the next 2 weeks. Once that happens, the media coverage will be overwhelming, and it will be much harder to control the narrative." William faced an agonizing decision: confront his father with evidence that would shatter his marriage and possibly his health, or risk allowing the scheme to proceed while hoping they could expose the truth quickly enough to prevent lasting damage. The decision was made for him when Mitchell reported that Camilla was planning to accelerate her timeline. Concerned that William might be growing suspicious, she had decided to trigger the discovery of the fraud within days rather than weeks. "She's meeting with the auditors tomorrow," Mitchell warned in an encrypted message. "I overheard her telling Thornfield that they can't wait any longer. The evidence against you will be discovered during what appears to be a routine review." That night, as William sat in his study surrounded by the evidence of the most elaborate betrayal in royal history, he made the decision that would define his reign before it even began. He would not allow himself to be destroyed by lies, and he would not permit the monarchy to be damaged by someone who had exploited the family's trust. The time for investigation was over. Tomorrow, Prince William would begin the most dangerous confrontation of his life, knowing that the stakes were nothing less than the future of the crown and the truth about one of the most shocking betrayals in royal history. The game was about to reach its climax, and only one side would survive intact. The morning of November 15th began like any other at Buckingham Palace, but Prince William knew it would end with the royal family forever changed. He had spent the night making final preparations with Rothwell's team, ensuring that every piece of evidence was documented and secured, every communication recorded, and every legal avenue explored. At precisely 9 a.m., William requested an urgent private meeting with King Charles, using the code phrase they had established for matters of constitutional importance. The king, assuming it concerned upcoming Commonwealth meetings, agreed to see his son immediately after his morning briefing with the Prime Minister. William arrived at his father's private study carrying a leather briefcase that contained enough evidence to bring down a government.
King Charles, seated behind the ornate desk that had served monarchs for generations, looked up with the warm smile he reserved for family moments. "William, you look troubled," the king observed, his natural paternal instincts immediately detecting his son's tension.
"Is everything well with Catherine and the children?" "Father," William began, choosing his words carefully, "what I'm about to tell you will be the most difficult conversation we've ever had.
I need you to listen completely before responding, because the future of our family and the monarchy depends on how we handle the next few hours."
The gravity in William's voice immediately commanded the king's full attention. Charles set aside his papers and gestured for his son to sit in the chair beside the desk, the same chair where William had received guidance about royal duties since childhood.
For the next hour, William methodically presented the evidence against Camilla, beginning with Mitchell's observations and building through the mountain of financial records, recordings, and communications that Rothwell's team had gathered. He watched his father's face transform from confusion to disbelief to anguish as the scope of the betrayal became clear.
King Charles remained silent throughout the presentation, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his face growing paler with each revelation. When William finished by playing the recording of Camilla laughing about stupid donors to children's charities, the king closed his eyes and sat in complete silence for several minutes.
"How long have you known?" Charles asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper.
3 weeks, William replied.
I wanted to be absolutely certain before bringing this to you. I also needed to ensure we had enough evidence to protect the monarchy from the damage she's planned. The king stood and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens, the same view that had comforted generations of monarchs during times of crisis. "She's been lying to me for years," he said, his voice heavy with pain. "Everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about her commitment to the family, about her character, it's all been a deception." William felt his heart break for his father, but he knew they couldn't afford to focus on personal pain when immediate action was required.
"Father, the audit is scheduled for this afternoon. If we don't act now, she'll trigger the discovery of evidence that implicates me. The damage to the monarchy could be irreversible." Charles turned back to his son, and William saw something he had never witnessed before, his father looking truly old and vulnerable.
The weight of realizing that his wife had been systematically betraying not just him but the institution he had served his entire life was almost overwhelming. "What do you recommend?" the king asked, his voice steadying as his training reasserted itself. "We need to act before she does," William said. "Rothwell's team is ready to move. We can have all the co-conspirators in custody within hours, and we can secure the evidence before it can be destroyed. But we need your authorization for some of the actions we'll have to take." What followed was the most painful decision of Charles's reign. With tears in his eyes, he authorized the arrest of his wife on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and treason. He also approved William's plan to simultaneously move against the entire network of conspirators, ensuring that no one could escape or destroy evidence. By noon, Operation Crown Jewel, as Rothwell had codenamed the operation, was in motion. Coordinated raids across London and international locations resulted in the arrest of 15 individuals, including Camilla herself, who was taken into custody as she arrived at Clarence House following what she believed was a successful meeting with the auditors. The moment of Camilla's arrest was captured by palace security cameras, and the footage would later become one of the most shocking pieces of evidence in the case. Her immediate reaction wasn't surprise or denial, but rage at being outmaneuvered. "You have no idea what you're destroying," she shouted at the arresting officers. "This family will never survive what's coming." Meanwhile, simultaneous raids at various financial institutions resulted in the seizure of millions of pounds in stolen charity funds and the discovery of additional evidence that expanded the scope of the conspiracy. Bank executives who had facilitated the money laundering were arrested, and prosecutors began building cases that would ultimately result in dozens of convictions. The most dramatic moment came when authorities raided the Swiss offices of Klaus Weber, Camilla's primary financial advisor. Weber had been in the middle of destroying documents when police arrived, and his computer contained encrypted communications detailing plans to expand the scheme to target royal families in other Commonwealth nations. As news of the arrests began to leak, William and his father faced the challenge of managing the public relations crisis that would inevitably follow. They had prepared statements that emphasized the monarchy's commitment to transparency and accountability, but they knew that the scandal would dominate headlines worldwide for months. The afternoon brought an unexpected development when Margaret Thornfield, Camilla's private secretary, requested immunity in exchange for providing additional evidence against her former employer. Thornfield's testimony revealed that Camilla had been planning to use the monarchy's financial resources to support political movements designed to destabilize democratic institutions across Europe. She wasn't just stealing money, Thornfield explained to investigators. She was building a network to influence elections and policy decisions throughout the Commonwealth. The charity fraud was just the funding mechanism for much larger political ambitions.
This revelation elevated the case from financial fraud to matters of national security, involving intelligence services from multiple countries and requiring coordination with international law enforcement agencies. The scope of Camilla's ambitions shocked even experienced investigators who thought they had seen everything. The man despaired until the contract.
As evening approached, King Charles faced the most difficult public statement of his reign. Standing in the same room where his mother had addressed the nation during times of crisis, he spoke directly to the British people about the betrayal that had rocked the royal family. Today we learned that someone entrusted with upholding the values and traditions of our monarchy chose instead to betray that trust in the most profound way possible. The king said, his voice steady despite the personal anguish visible in his eyes. The crown has always been sustained by the trust and support of the people we serve.
That trust has been violated, but it will be restored. The king's address was watched by over 40 million people in Britain alone, with millions more viewing internationally. Public reaction was swift and largely supportive of the royal family's decisive action, though questions about how such a conspiracy could have developed undetected would persist for months. As the day ended, William stood in his father's study, looking at the empty chair where Camilla had sat during countless family meetings, planning her betrayal while surrounded by people who trusted her completely. The personal cost of the day's events was immense, but the monarchy had survived its greatest internal threat in living memory. Tomorrow, William told his father, we begin rebuilding not just our family but the institution itself. This crisis will make us stronger, more transparent, and more accountable to the people we serve. But even as they planned for the future, both men knew that the most challenging phase lay ahead. The trials, the media scrutiny, and the long process of rebuilding public trust that had been shattered by the most shocking royal betrayal in British history. 6 months after the arrest that shook the British monarchy to its foundation, the trials of Regina v.
Camilla Parker Bowles and others began at the Central Criminal Court in London. The courtroom, normally reserved for the most serious criminal cases, was packed with international media and legal observers witnessing what many called the trial of the century.
Prince William sat in the witness gallery preparing to give testimony that would complete the case against the woman who had nearly destroyed his future and the institution he was born to serve. The months since her arrest had been among the most challenging in royal history, but they had also proven the resilience of both the monarchy and the British people's commitment to justice. The lead prosecutor, Sir James Pemberton QC, began his opening statement with words that would echo through legal history. This case concerns the most systematic betrayal of public trust in the modern era of constitutional monarchy. The defendant exploited her position, her marriage, and the goodwill of the British people to steal from sick children while planning to destroy the heir to the throne. The evidence presented during the trial painted a picture of conspiracy that was even more extensive than originally believed. Financial experts testified that the total amount stolen exceeded £75 million, funds that had been donated by ordinary citizens who believed they were helping children's hospitals, veterans organizations, and disaster relief efforts. Perhaps the most damaging testimony came from Klaus Weber, the Swiss lawyer who had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Weber revealed that Camilla's ultimate goal had been to accumulate enough compromising information and financial leverage to effectively control the monarchy from behind the scenes. She spoke often of her frustration with being overshadowed by the younger royals. Weber testified, her plan was to eliminate Prince William from the succession and position herself as the power behind the throne during any future reign by Prince Harry, whom she believed would be easier to manipulate. The international scope of the conspiracy became clear when prosecutors presented evidence of Camilla's connections to political movements across Europe. She had been funding organizations that sought to destabilize democratic institutions, viewing the British monarchy as a model for authoritarian influence that could be expanded globally. When Prince William took the stand, his testimony was measured but powerful. He spoke about the personal betrayal of having someone he had trusted as a stepmother actively working to destroy him, but he focused primarily on the harm done to the charitable causes and the people they served. The children in those cancer wards, the veterans struggling with PTSD, the families affected by natural disasters. They trusted us with their donations, William said, his voice carrying the authority of his future kingship. That trust was sacred, and it was violated in the most callous way possible. The defense attempted to portray Camilla as a victim of manipulation by more sophisticated criminals, but this strategy collapsed when prosecutors played recordings of her conversations with co-conspirators, clearly showing her as the driving force behind the conspiracy. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when Camilla herself took the stand in her own defense. Her testimony revealed a woman who had convinced herself that her crimes were justified by what she saw as unfair treatment by the royal family and the British public. "I gave everything to this family," she said, her voice filled with bitterness. "I endured decades of criticism in comparison to Diana. I supported Charles through his most difficult periods, and my reward was to be overshadowed by children young enough to be my grandchildren." Her words, intended to generate sympathy, instead revealed the narcissistic mindset that had driven her to betray the most fundamental principles of public service. The jury's reaction was visible. Several members shook their heads in disgust at her complete lack of remorse for the children and families harmed by her actions. The trial also revealed the remarkable courage of Thomas Mitchell, whose decision to speak out had prevented an even greater catastrophe. Mitchell's testimony about the personal risks he faced and his motivation to protect both the monarchy and innocent children made him a hero in the eyes of the public. "I took an oath to protect the crown," Mitchell said during his testimony.
That oath didn't just mean protecting the building or the people. It meant protecting the institution and the values it represents. Sometimes protecting the crown means protecting it from those who would corrupt it from within. As the trial progressed, the prosecution presented evidence of the full scope of damage that would have occurred if the conspiracy had succeeded. Expert witnesses testified that the planned destruction of Prince William's reputation would have triggered a constitutional crisis, potentially leading to the end of the monarchy itself. The international implications were equally serious. Intelligence officials testified that Camilla's network had been identified by foreign security services as a threat to democratic stability across Europe. Her arrest had disrupted planned operations in several countries and led to investigations that uncovered similar corruption schemes targeting other institutions. When the jury retired to consider their verdict, the world watched and waited. The deliberations lasted 3 days, during which the jurors carefully examined thousands of pages of evidence and hours of recorded conversations. When they returned, their unanimous guilty verdict on all charges was met with applause from the public gallery. Judge Sir Robert Hartwell, in passing sentence, spoke words that captured the gravity of the case. The defendant held a position of the highest trust and used it to commit crimes of the utmost seriousness. She stole from children, betrayed her family, and threatened the very foundations of our constitutional system. The sentence of 25 years imprisonment reflects not just the scale of her crimes, but society's condemnation of such profound betrayal. The sentences for the other conspirators ranged from 8 to 15 years, with Klaus Weber receiving 12 years for his role in establishing the money laundering network. Several prominent business figures who had facilitated the scheme were also sentenced, sending a clear message about the consequences of enabling corruption. In the months following the trial, King Charles implemented sweeping reforms to royal financial oversight, establishing independent monitoring systems and requiring public disclosure of all charitable activities. The transparency measures went far beyond what had ever been required, but they were necessary to rebuild public trust. Prince William used the crisis as an opportunity to modernize the monarchy's relationship with the public. He established a new system of regular public accountability sessions, where citizens could directly question royal financial decisions and charitable activities. The innovation was initially controversial, but ultimately strengthened public support for the institution. The stolen funds were gradually recovered and returned to the intended charitable causes, with additional compensation provided by the Crown to ensure that no legitimate charity suffered lasting damage. The children's hospitals and veterans organizations that had been targeted received unprecedented support as the royal family worked to repair the harm that had been done. Thomas Mitchell was awarded the Royal Victorian Order for his service to the Crown, becoming one of the few non-aristocrats to receive such recognition for protecting the monarchy itself. His courage in speaking truth to power became a model for ethical behavior within royal service. As the first anniversary of Camilla's arrest approached, King Charles gave an address that reflected on the lessons learned from the crisis. "We have faced the greatest internal threat in our modern history," he said, "and we have emerged stronger, more accountable, and more committed to the values we represent." Prince William, now recognized as a stronger and more capable future king for having navigated the crisis with such skill, continued his charitable work with renewed purpose. The attempt to destroy his reputation had instead enhanced his standing with the British people, who admired his courage in exposing corruption even when it meant confronting family members. The royal betrayal that had threatened to destroy the monarchy instead became the catalyst for its renewal. The institution that emerged from the crisis was more transparent, more accountable, and more deserving of public trust than it had been in generations. In her prison cell, Camilla continued to maintain her innocence and express resentment at what she saw as unfair treatment. But history would remember her not as a victim, but as the woman who nearly destroyed the crown through her own greed and ambition, only to strengthen it by forcing necessary reforms.
The monarchy had survived its greatest internal threat and emerged ready to serve the British people for generations to come, forever changed by the betrayal that was exposed when a loyal guard chose truth over silence, and a prince chose justice over family loyalty. The crown endured as it always had, but now it wore its responsibility more humbly and carried its trust more carefully than ever before.
Royal betrayal exposed. William intervenes after guard reveals Camilla's secret.